Yes, I'm now joined by John Graham. He's a former US diplomat in Libya. Mr. Graham, thanks very much indeed for joining us here on RT. Now, Gaddafi has announced a ceasefire. So why are plans for this no-fly zone still going ahead?
Well, I think because the nations involved don't trust him, and they have every reason not to trust him. So it's quite logical that they would go ahead, because it takes a lot of planning. They have to organize the airfields on which the planes will fly from. They have to coordinate air forces that don't normally collaborate together. They have to decide on lots of military and non-military measures, so it's going to take a little while. The interesting thing, I mean, Gaddafi is a very smart guy, a very canny guy. He's obviously hoping to delay the preparations to cast as much confusion and doubt as he can into the nations who would be implementing the no-fly zone with the announcement made by the Libyan foreign minister.
So could perhaps that ploy work if he's able to cause confusion and perhaps continue with his actions against his own people? Do you think it's too little too late what the UN is doing?
No, it's not too little too late. Clearly, it's in time to prevent a bloodbath in Benghazi. And it's like I must say, I was very surprised that the UN took this action. I worked at the United Nations for 3 years, and for them to take an action this bold is really quite extraordinary and could set an enormous precedent. To do this.
But many will question this action. They'll say, look, no-fly zone, if it's humanitarian intervention, call it what you want. We've seen what happens with intervention in the likes of Afghanistan and Iraq. It will lead to more civilian casualties than what we're getting at the moment in Libya. It
could happen. That's why I'm so extraordinarily surprised at what the UN did. It's taking a very, very bold step. The foreign ministers of the United States and France in particular have made rather bellicose statements about the need to do this. And not only have they talked about humanitarian intervention, they've talked about taking Gaddafi out. In other words, regime change. This was a very, very big surprise. And it seems to have caught the Libyans by surprise as well.
The US, though, you're a former US diplomat. That doesn't seem to be taking really a very proactive stance. It looks as though it's letting others, such as Britain and France, do its dirty work for it. I mean, is that a fair charge?
Yes, let's put it this way. The UN is hanging back, although behind the scenes it is our surveillance planes, our so-called AWACS planes, refueling planes. A lot of the behind-the-scenes preparation and support for the no-fly zone is being supported by the United States and the Sixth Fleet. In terms of the actual aircraft involved, it looks now like the British will be in the forefront with their Typhoon fighters, their fighter bombers, which are admirably suited for this kind of intervention.
Many may be asking at this stage, all this concentration on Libya, but look what's happening in Yemen and Bahrain. Why isn't the UN as concerned in what's happening there as it is in Libya? It's one rule for one and one rule for another, so it seems.
Well, it could change. I believe there are 40 people killed in Yemen this morning or yesterday, and if the humanitarian issues become severe enough, if we're faced with something like we're faced now in Libya, with an entire large city, Benghazi, under threat of well, as Gaddafi said, almost obliteration, then the focus may shift. Then what happens if you have the possibility of interventions in Libya, Yemen, Bahrain, other places? Good Lord, where does it go from there?
Let me ask you. Sorry, let me just quickly ask you before we finish, based on your experience in Libya and obviously your experience concerning Gaddafi, what do you make of his behaviour at the moment? Does he really think that he can actually stay in power? And if so, what would the consequences be?
I think he does think he'll stay in power. I think this is what his strategy is. I think he's assuming that with the announcement by his foreign minister that Libya would obey it, that preparations will somehow stop, and that he'll be able to buy some time. For example, he might offer some minor concessions, like a semi-autonomy for Benghazi, for example, and then those concessions will erode. Meanwhile, the West, having not implemented the no-fly zone because they had nothing to shoot at, will lose interest. There'll be some other events in the world that will distract attention, and in a year, 18 months, everything will be back to was. I mean, that's Gaddafi's strategy.
So realistically, just before we finish, the UN, the international community, will have failed and Gaddafi's won.
That's certainly what he hopes. He holds the trigger. As long as his troops don't move, there's nothing for the no-fly zone.
That's what he hopes, John, just finally. That's what he hopes, but is that really realistic? I mean, is he going to really hold on, do you think?
I don't know. To tell you the truth, I could offer a flip answer to your listeners and viewers, but at this point, I think it's completely up in the air.
Well, with your experience from Libya, it's good to hear from you. Former US diplomat John Graham, thanks for joining us live here on RTTV.
Thank you.